Thank you for the grand welcome. As I rolled into town earlier this evening, I wondered where everyone was, and they're all in here. I'm going to just have a little discussion with you about this house that I know most of you are familiar with, and many people walk past every day. I'm doing some client representative work for the Botanical Gardens at the moment. We always joke about how everyone feels they own the Botanical Gardens. They all have a story and they all have special memories there. And I'm starting to realise that 62 Bridge Street is the same for Richmond. Everyone feels they own it. We have most people hanging over the front fence most days, and the builders report that a large number of you have already been through the house several times. I saw this, the property came on the market. I mean, I know most of you know Ted and his history, but the property came on the market on Easter Thursday in 2021. I've been having a conversation with a friend who I've known for 38 years from Brisbane. He and I studied together at Queensland Uni. He's an architect, quite successful architect on big projects in Brisbane. And he had said that, with COVID and his inability to travel to his Kuala Lumpur office and his big Brisbane office, and his wife likes walking, and so he was interested in buying something in Tasmania. So when this popped up and I saw some of the little details, I thought, oh dear. This one is quite fragile. The Georgian reworked windows, the very simple Georgian fireplace, the wide timber board ceiling, and as you can see, some of the very appealing wallpaper and ceiling lining in the back bedroom. But the real gem of this property is what's known as the engineer's hut, which is the little weatherboard building at the back of the site, which has out of that small window a view of the bridge. And it was a very simple, modest wooden structure that was built to supervise the works on the bridge. And eventually, looking at it a little bit further in the real estate photos, I could see that there were some significant problems. And nevertheless, recommended heartily to Richard that he should buy immediately, which he did the same day. So I think it was only on the market for one afternoon, which was Easter Thursday afternoon in 2021. Now, he, unlike me, who left university and disappeared overseas for 15 years, he has developed a kind of strong, solid practice in Brisbane, largely starting with houses. He does some quite good insertions into the West End and some of the heritage areas in Brisbane, and then graduated to very large university buildings, the ABC. This is the Melbourne Postturtle Centre in North Queensland. He's done a lot of community centres. He's experimenting with timber laminated buildings. He does big things. And it's only in the last few years that he had started to show any interest in reworking existing buildings. So this is his office in Brisbane, which is an old pub in Wollongabba. And there are offices upstairs, and there are a series of bars, restaurants and other tenancies downstairs. And so I figured the little house, whereas my background, of course, I'd gone straight overseas after finishing uni. I'd spent 9 years working for the now Pritzker Prize winner Sir David Chipperfield. My first job on site was Central Hall of the Natural History Museum. I spent years working in Leipzig on the Grassi Museum, which had been bombed by the British, and then immediately they appointed a British architect to restore it. So my background was very much civic projects, and then I worked mostly on terrace houses and things when I had my decade in Sydney, and then moved to Hobart a decade ago, where I have set about doing a number of Georgian and Victorian restorations, mostly removing concrete in a lot of places. And this was one that a lot of you may recognise from Bathurst Street in Hobart, which was a sort of big house and little house that we fixed up. And I quite like leaving as much as possible and doing as little as you need to. So you can see that I would generally very much like to keep old details and signs of wear and tear in my work. So yes, poor Richard. He and his wife came down to see what they had purchased, and we set about working collaboratively on a way forward. Obviously, with my involvement with Heritage Tasmania and Heritage Council, I know how the system works. We knew we weren't going to have too many problems with Clarence, who have a kind of fairly modest involvement in heritage things, certainly at that time, where they had one external consultant, but not a lot. Anyway, so the property was given to John Turnbull. He had started out on the shopping gang and had ended up in charge of the shopping gang, but by the end of the Bruges job, he was the overseer of the works. He was granted the title with the original hut, and either he or a subsequent owner built the front two rooms of the existing dwelling in brick. And between the sort of front brick structure that you can see is two other rooms that would have originally been timber lean-tos, between the sort of front brick house and the engineer's hut, which is the earliest bit. And at some point those two interstitial rooms were rebuilt, also in timber, all of which was also rotten. He then moved to Hobart in 1839 and New Norfolk in 1841 as superintendent of public works, and there is a beautiful chapel in New Norfolk that recently went on the market in the middle of town, and he was the superintendent of that. Anyway, so you can see on the sort of marking of Turnbull's property on the 1820s map, and he then sold his site to Buscombe, who had built the mill next door. So we tried to display basically the sort of significance of the various bits of the building, the oldest bit being the engineer's hut in dark red, the second oldest bit being the cottage you can see from the street, and then the various other bits and pieces. We were lucky to find, I had a lovely deep dive in the state archives, didn't want to come out, but we were very lucky to find a photo by the renowned photographer Richard of the bridge which showed the cottage, and Heritage Tasmania were very happy when I put that into their heritage report. So really what is being proposed, a lot of you will recall there was an asbestos garage on the site that I think had Ted's beautiful EH Holden in it that was in immaculate condition that he took out once a week to the shops or something like that. Anyway, the asbestos garage had to come down, as did the asbestos enclosure to the veranda. We were given approval to remove the 1940s bathroom and kitchen at the rear, although we have kept the foundation plate or the stone base of that. And the proposal is that there will be a modest roof pavilion where the garage is, and the rest of the buildings have been restored. And the idea is that the house can be occupied by different generations of the family, or some of their friends, whatever. And so it will be something. It's a very fragile house, and I think in this case, while I'm usually encouraging houses that aren't moved in constantly, this one really probably benefits from not having to cope with kayak storage, or bike storage, or the camping storage and everything else. So the family intend to use, they've got 2 adult children, so they all like walking and come down regularly, so the idea is that they will use it a lot and eventually spend more time here as his work responsibilities diminish. So the first stage, even before the DA, was we had to start to unpick the engineer's hut. As many of you will know, the high side property is a fair bit higher, and it had over 70, 80, 90 years, had the soil of the flat garden above it pushed against it. Weatherboard's not a great retaining wall, and therefore there wasn't much left of it. So the first problem that we had to deal with was actually very gently, with a series of hand diggers, digging out that gap at the side and making sure that the building had some space to breathe from the outside. The engineer's hut still had its shingle battens, and so we have managed to expose those. We've put new plywood with black tan above it, and then above that is all the layers of insulation and sarking and the new roof. We were able to reinforce the structure but not lose the existing structure, and reinforce the subfloor by adding all extra structure underneath. And then the whole thing has been lined with new Tazo walls, but I did particularly love this wall where the original structure is about 150 mil out of kilter over its 2.5 height. So it protrudes about 70 mil out at the bottom and then is recessed about 70 mil at the top. So one of the biggest problems that we faced was that the side wall, some of the internal photos you will remember had a lot of peeling wallpaper. The side wall had been pushed out by 150 mil, so that's quite a lot. And our heritage engineer Peter Spratt was able to get large parts of his limbs into this junction between the wall and the floor. And we realised that this had been caused by increased wind speeds against the building. It's quite a common problem with very early built things that were built by British carpenters who had no understanding of the roaring 40s. And of course, those 1 in 100 wind speeds are now happening 2 or 3 times a year. This week been a case in point. And so, as the prevailing breeze came from uphill, it was effectively pushing the roof off the house. It wasn't very well attached, I must say, and pushing the wall out, which then meant water from the gutters, which dusted, went inside, and caused problems. And then on other walls, we found, beside multiple layers of wallpaper, that in fact there was no plaster. There was a little bit of wet plaster left in the front 2 rooms, but the second 2 rooms were simply apple crates, hessian, and paper for both walls and ceilings. So what we had to do was add a whole new layer of structure inside the roof. You can see the central bracing beam, and then we also had to do a number of perimeter works to hold it all down, and then it was easy to get all of the insulation in before the recycling and then the roofing went on. We tried to develop a system of just pushing back the side wall of the house, but we realised it had 0 foundations. It was kind of sitting on a landscaping. So in the end, the wall had to be taken down, the bricks were cleaned. It's quite an unusual English bond pattern. They were all cleaned and stacked, and then that wall was rebuilt with the approved French door opening that you see in that photo. You can see in this photo some of the beautiful rotten timber that we found consistently under the floors. So the floor substructure has had to be rebuilt. A lot of the time, as you know, the airspace under the floors is meant to be about 400, 450 minimum, and most of the time we have the floors with the soil butting and pushing against the underside of the boards. So, of course, every time the neighbours uphill wanted their garden, the boards down here get a bit wetter. So this is a fairly drastic photo showing the original structure of the engineer's hut. All of the windows are actually recycled, so the engineer's hut has a sort of pivot window that is an old Georgian sash, and even the front windows of the building are not originally weighted sashes. They are Georgian sashes, but they have been recycled from something else. So this is the brick wall rebuilt. They did such a beautiful job of cleaning the bricks that we have no wish to repaint them, and so they will be left. And you'll see from walking down the street and later photo that we've also started to reduce the 500 layers of plastic paint on the front brickwork. We've managed to get rid of at least half of them, and so that brickwork is starting to come back to life as well. You can see behind the builder on his phone the original kitchen chimney, and that still has the enamel fireplace in it, which will stay. We were lucky in that we were able to start the process slowly, so I've saved a metre square of each of the 9 linos that were in the house. There are a number of 20s and 30s glass fittings, lampshades and pendants that we've saved that will all go back into the house. The real gems came in that the front two rooms, the floors had never been lifted. And so we've found a completely marvellous collection of stuff. Under the lino was a whole lot of women's weeklies, so we've got those to display in the house. And then when they were putting the new power cable in the front garden, the excavator guy was very proud that he saw the edge of that and managed to stop and dig it out by hand, which someone had completely thrown off the front veranda. So we now have a situation where I've convinced the client to commission Genevieve Lilley, who's a beautiful, very talented designer and artist, and she is making an installation that will be built into the front room of the house. We know that Heritage Tasmania really loves it when smaller objects coming out of the site are somehow displayed, and if they can be displayed in a way that is permanent to the building, then even better. So for example, when the head girder was built in the city and some of the panels of the walls and the floors that are close to the public have got bits of the bricks and some of the fines embedded into the buildings, and they love that. So Genevieve is doing a beautiful display of some of these things which will be displayed in the front room of the house in perpetuity. This is some of the raw apple crate walls. So this is what we were finding underneath the hessian and the paper. And so we have saved those. This room is now a bathroom with a courtyard over this area. And so you actually look out of the bathroom onto this apple crate wall. And then we're using remnants of the apple crate to reline the whole walls inside the house. Generally elsewhere, it's solid timber used as wall lining, quite careful shadow gap between walls and floors to account for some movement, and that's the neutral ceiling of the function rooms, which will stay. This is the brickwork at the front with at least 7 layers of plastic paint come off it. The front veranda structure was incredibly damaged, and so we've had to rebuild that, again, all with new foundations. Generally, we've got a philosophy that we've agreed with Heritage Tasmania that the old work, or where there was an old veranda frame, it will be painted. Where we have our approved extension to the veranda, which now goes around the corner, that will be left as dressed clear timber. Where we have a new window, it will be left as dressed clear timber. Where it's a reworked window in an original location, it will be painted. So there's a kind of logic to the mixture of painted material and clear material that you'll see. So that's it, really. It's a long process. We hope to finish the pavilion or the cottage in the next couple of months and then start on the pavilion. But I'm sure it'll give you all much delight as you continue to wander past every day and look at it. Anyway, thanks very much.